Good evening and welcome everyone to this, our UNSW Psychology International Information Evening. My name is Nick. I'm our Senior Recruitment Product Manager here at UNSW, which is really just a very long title, which means that I have to know everything possibly I can about all of our degrees in UNSW Science, including our psychology programs, to make sure that you've got the best information available to you to make the right decision for you, whether that's UNSW, whether that's somewhere else. Giving you opportunities like tonight's event to really make sure that you can ask us all those nitty-gritty questions that you've got about all the psychology programs we have at UNSW to make the right decision for you. I'm joined by some of my colleagues as well, who I'll introduce momentarily, and we really do have a very action-packed night available to you to really make sure that you're getting across the breadth of psychology pathways that we offer at UNSW, but also to get a feel for where those careers can take you. There's so many different career pathways out there that a major in psychology or an entire degree in psychology can lead you down. And we've got some of our current students here who are going to be able to talk through some of their pathways that they're pursuing at the moment, but also one of our alumni as well who will talk us through some of the broader pathways that you might consider with a psychology program. Now, as we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the Bedigal people that are the traditional custodians of the land that the UNSW Kensington campus stands on. I'd also like to acknowledge the Darawal people, who are the traditional custodians of the land that I'm currently on tonight. Obviously, in lockdown, we're coming to you virtually from our homes. And I'd also like to pay my respects to the elders, both past and present, and extend that respect to other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders who might be present here today. So as I mentioned, we've got a couple of our team and also our current students who are here to join us tonight to make sure that you're getting a really solid understanding of everything that UNSW Psychology has to offer. I'm joined by Ali Tingy, who's our Faculty Recruitment Officer for Science. She's going to give us an overview of psychology at UNSW, including all the courses that you can do psychology in, the application process, and also really touch on some of those career outcomes and career pathways that you can end up pursuing. Ali's also one of our alumni, so she's been through the psychology program. She'll give us all the ins and outs of what it's like to do the program, and again, leverage the fact that she's got plenty of friends who are off in very different and very diverse career pathways, and she'll be able to share those experiences tonight. We've also got Emily Chan, who's a third-year Bachelor of Psychology honours student. She'll be able to share the current student perspective on what she's been getting up to so far in her degree, and also what the future holds in store for her. Now, we're going to whiz through some of the ins and outs, the formalities around the application process, and some of that nitty-gritty information I'm sure you're going to be really interested to hear. But really, at the very end, that's your chance to ask us questions and make sure that you're getting your questions answered. So there'll be a Q&A session at the end. You can use the chat function on Microsoft Teams Live, and you can also like questions to vote them up, and we'll be answering as many possible questions as we can tonight. Now, as we begin, I'm actually going to dive in to do a really brief overview of UNSW, so who we are and also where we're going. So as a university, UNSW was founded back in 1949. Now, it's significant because we were founded off the back of World War II, and there was actually a shortage here in Australia of scientists and engineers. So as a university, we began by excelling in the sciences and excelling in engineering. But since then, we've broadened ourselves. We've got 300 plus degrees that we offer across 6 faculties, offering everything from medicine to law to arts, design and architecture, but obviously still excelling very much at the sciences and engineering. We've got 60,000 students. It's a huge number of students. It's a very lively campus. Obviously, we're going through some very challenging times globally at the moment, but we're pivoting as much as we can online. So our student clubs and societies, for example, are running all their activities online, and our students are still finding really unique, important and novel ways to connect with each other and really bring that sense of community together. So 60,000 students, you're guaranteed to meet students across every different faculty as a student studying with us. And that's great because it's going to challenge your ideas. It's going to change your perspectives and really push you to grow and learn. We've also got a work integrated learning platform. So WIL is one of those lovely university terms that probably doesn't mean much to you now, but will mean a lot to you down the track, because it's really the practical industry focused side of university. So Our work integrated learning team sit behind all of our faculties, and they're all about linking industry in with our students, so with our courses. And so you could do, say, an internship with a marketing organization, and that could count back towards your degree as a unit of study. And you might be working in the Sydney CBD for 2 days a week interning at this company, but it counts back as course credit. And so across all of our degrees, we're making sure that we embed as many of those opportunities as possible. And there's certainly many opportunities across psychology to make sure that you're building that practical experience from the get-go. We're a top 50 university in the world, it's ranked 43rd globally, and I think what that really speaks to is the fact that you're going to get to meet some incredible academics who are very much at the fore of their field, but you're also going to be meeting lots of students who are also doing really unique, really interesting things. I mean, we're the #1 institution in Australia attended by startup founders, so there's a really strong entrepreneurial bent to a lot of what we do. A lot of people who are going on to become CEOs at the age of 20, 21 because they've had a great idea, they've leveraged some of the university's backing and really made something of it. 300 exchange partners. Obviously, in this current climate, it's challenging to go on exchange, but we're really hopeful that by the time you're able to join us, we'll be able to bring online more of those exchange opportunities again, because we know that global perspective is really, really important to your employability outcomes at the very end of your degree, but also just in terms of really building a well-rounded set of experiences that put you in great stead for the rest of your career. In terms of UNSW Science, I mean, at a faculty level, we've got over 400 partner organizations. So there's many, many opportunities for you to engage with industry, for you to undertake internships that count back towards your degree. And again, it's something we really pride ourselves on. Everything is diverse, from aviation to working for government agencies, working for the not-for-profit sector. There's so many ways in which you might be able to leverage your experiences. And we'll talk a little bit later as well about how some of that manifests specifically for our psychology program. Some of the great relationships that we've got with some of the foremost psychological bodies in Australia. We're all about driving innovation, so a lot of our subjects are ranked in the top 50 globally, and I think and I mean psychology is one of those where we're ranked 24th in the world, and it speaks to the people you're going to be learning from. They're very much changing the way that we think about these subject areas, but also they're going to share that knowledge with you, and you'll get opportunities to engage in research with them, to be able to collaborate, and that's where you'll be able to make a global impact ultimately at the end of the day. So hopefully that gives you a bit of a top-level summary of what we're all about at UNSW. And without any further ado, I'm actually going to throw straight over to my colleague, Ali. So as I mentioned, she's one of our alumnus. She is one of our alumni. She's an alumnus here at the university and studied psychology herself. And she's going to take us through all the ins and outs of how you can study psychology at UNSW, and also where it can take you from that career side of things as well. So, Ali, I'll welcome you to the virtual screen, and over to you.
Awesome, thanks, Nick. So yeah, as Nick mentioned, I am an alumna of UNSW Psychology, so it's quite exciting that I get to share a little bit about the school and the degree program offerings we have with you today. So to kick off, I want to touch a little bit more on why UNSW Psychology, and a few parts here Nick's already mentioned when he was talking about why you might consider UNSW Science. As was mentioned, we are ranked 24th in the world, and we also have a long-standing tradition of research. So the faculty staff are researchers. You're getting taught by people who are at the forefront of their field and emerging things as they're coming out. You're sort of right there as it's happening, which is quite beneficial and quite exciting, I think. We also have some really cutting edge facilities. So in terms of our teaching facilities and research facilities, we have specialist laboratories. So the behavioural neuroscience lab, for example, we have cognitive science labs that run specialist software, specialist equipment like the EEG or transcranial magnetic stimulation, all those kind of things that you can get hands-on with as early as even in your undergraduate in some spaces with research. We're also a really supportive community. So I might not go too deep into this because I think Emily will share some of her experiences later with the Psychology Society, but as well as the really vibrant student society, we also have a very well established peer mentoring program. So it's been running for over 20 years, and any of you who are considering studying a bachelor's degree with us, you can sort of rest assured that you've got third and fourth year students who are there, who are dedicated to making sure that that transition is smooth and that you find your feet really quickly and make the most out of being part of the school. So talking a little bit about why UNSW Psychology, I now want to take a step back at psychology as a whole. I think depending on your experience, some of you who are maybe a little more interested in the postgraduate side may already be quite aware of this, but I know that a lot of students who start at the undergraduate level have only been exposed to a really small subsection of psychology, and there's actually a lot more to it than kind of meets the eye initially. When you consider all the different areas of research that you can go out in, it's everything from psychology's intersection with medicine through to its intersection with computer science. I actually did some research during my undergraduate in computational cognition, and that's where my sort of path through psychology went. That's something that I had never heard of before my second, if not third year of study. So it's quite exciting, all the different paths you can take there. As well as the paths in research, it's also where you can practice. So it's not, I guess sometimes it's a little bit easier to see how you can go in different directions when you're doing your own research. But I think the fact that you can actually practice and register in a psychologist in so many different areas, again, speaks to that breadth of opportunity. So for those of you who are sort of less familiar with how practicing as a psychologist works in Australia, there are a number of different areas of practice endorsement you can get on top of your general registration. So when you have general registration, you can practice in all sorts of different areas, but you don't have that sort of extra specialist badge that says I'm specifically a clinical psychologist or sport and exercise psychologist. So I've popped up the areas of practice endorsement here that have the registrar programs associated with them, because I think the fact that there are 9 different ones that have these programs existing that you can specifically specialize in really speaks to the breadth of opportunity career-wise. Which I think is a good place to transition into what the actual accreditation process looks like and how you actually become a psychologist in Australia. And I will note that this is specific to practicing in Australia, so obviously we can't advise on what the regulations are in any other countries. So if you are thinking about studying and going back to your home country to practice, you'll probably have to look into what that looks like in terms of translating your qualification, getting it assessed by your local accrediting body. But if you are thinking you want to come to Australia to practice and work, then this is the pathway that you need to follow. So you start off with your accredited undergraduate sequence of study, which is typically 4 years. So that's 3 years of coursework plus what's known as an honours year, which is a research intensive year where you produce your own thesis. Now, whichever undergraduate program you do, whichever university you go to, you need to be making sure that it's accredited by APAC, which is the Australian Psychological Accreditation Council. So any degree that's on their list of accredited degrees sets you up for this pathway. And regardless of which way you want to go in terms of specializations, those first 4 years are really the same. So you have a bit of time to explore, get involved with the discipline and see which pathway you want to take. Once you've finished your honours year, you've got a choice. So you can go down an academic pathway, which is an accredited master's program or professional doctorate program, or you can do supervised practice, so an internship kind of pathway. Both of these will lead to general registration, which is what you need to actually practice. The main reason why you might want to do the academic pathway is that that will also open up the opportunity to go on to the registrar program. And that registrar program is run through the Australian Psychology Society, and that's how you get that area of practice endorsement. So that little extra qualification that says, yes, I'm an organizational psychologist, or whichever area you choose. I think the other thing that's kind of important to highlight here is that an academic pathway doesn't mean that you're not getting practical hands-on experience. There is supervised practice built into those pathways. So it's just depending on whether you also want to do the degree study alongside it. So we might actually jump into the degrees now and the different areas that you can go into and different ways that you can meet the requirements. So in terms of our undergraduate programs, these are the ones that are going to count towards that first phase, so those first 4 years. And there are actually 7 different programs you can take, and I like to think of them in 2 different categories. So there are the Bachelor of Psychology and Advanced Science, which have what's called an embedded honours. So they're 4-year degrees where that 4th research year is included as part of the degree. You don't graduate before you do that, it's all sort of the one thing that you start. The other way you can do it is what's known often as a 3+1 model. So you do the first 3 years of coursework through one of these programs, and then you apply for that honours year as a standalone year. So essentially it's like doing 2 degrees, but it's the same 4 years. One thing that I think is important to highlight here is that if you are looking at UNSW degrees specifically and going into UNSW honours, there's no disadvantage to doing one way or the other. It depends on the degree. All of these degrees from an accreditation point of view get you to exactly the same spot, but they're obviously different degrees. They're going to have different experiences, different add-ons and things along the side. So you want to be picking the degree that is the right choice for you, because that's different for every student. If you do go straight into the next available honours cohort at the end of one of these 3-year degrees, you are held to the same entry requirements and the same mark standards as those who are in the 4-year degrees. So you're not disadvantaged in that sense. The one thing I will say is that if you are doing one of these 3-year degrees and then you take time off, then you're considered an external applicant, which is typically more competitive to get into honours. So if you are wanting to do honours and progress and pursue your registration, just keep that in mind. If you are going to take a break, make sure that you've got quite high marks, because it can be quite competitive. So we might go through the programs now and just give you a little bit of insight into what the different ones are. So I guess the kind of flagship program is the Bachelor of Psychology, which is really your focused psychology program. This is for students who think they're pretty certain that they want to go down this pathway. It's a little bit less exploratory in terms of the flexibility you have to add on double degrees or pick different majors and those kind of things. There is still some flexibility. You do have electives. There are some double degrees offered, but really it's for students who know they probably want to be a psychologist, or at least feeling confident to kind of commit to that path rather than spend time exploring your different options there. It is the most competitive of our programs, but again, it sort of just depends if that's what you're looking for there. The next one I'll talk about, our Bachelor of Advanced Science. So that's the other 4-year program. That's sort of, to flip that, that's your super flexible. Maybe you're not sure yet if you want to be a psychologist or you want to try something else. So I did a Bachelor of Science myself, and I combined psychology with chemistry. So you've got that freedom to explore other science majors, and there are a few more double degrees you can take with this. But those two are kind of similar in terms of, if you're pretty sure you want to do honours, you're a high achieving student, these are the kind of pathways for you. So next we'll move into the 3-year programs, and psychological science is actually a really interesting one because this is probably the most unique among the psychology programs. As well as doing your psychology major as part of the degree, you have the option to do a second major, but it's not limited to just Faculty of Science majors. It's majors that are relevant to psychology, so cognate areas, which might be criminology, human resource management, neuroscience, vision science. There's a whole host of different options there. This is really good for students who are thinking that you do want some exposure in a related area, you want something to complement your psychology, but you don't quite want to do a full double degree. So you don't want to do science combined with arts to get your criminology, you just want it all to be contained in your psychology degree. So that one is generally quite a good one to consider if you have those aligned interests. So science and life sciences are generalist science programs. They're pretty similar to advanced science in terms of you have the flexibility to explore different areas of science and double degrees associated with that. Life science is a little bit more restrictive in that it's only the life sciences majors, so you're not going to be exploring too much of physics and mathematics and the physical sciences over there. You have a bit more of a biology underpinning, but essentially they're pretty much the 3-year version of advanced science. So maybe if you're less sure about wanting to do the honours, you might consider these programs. The last two I want to talk about are Science and Business and Science International, and these are kind of like your science degree plus a bit. So Science and Business, you do core business units. So you've got your psychology major, but you've also got these core business courses that are setting you up to be sort of well informed in that business setting. Perhaps maybe you want to be an organizational psychologist and you want a bit of business studies backing you up there. Similar to psychological science, I would probably recommend this for students who want that taste of business but don't quite want a full double degree, don't want to do a Bachelor of Commerce alongside your science. You want to contain it all in the one program. Then we have Science International, which is probably our most unique and different offering. So this is actually a 4-year degree, but it does count for those first 3 years of the accreditation. The reason that it's longer is it actually has an extended language minor. So if you want to do your science or specifically your psychology major alongside studying a language, so that might be, say, French or Japanese or whatever the case may be, you do get that language qualification as part of the degree. You also do a number of subjects that are sort of international studies or cultural studies related, and there's a compulsory exchange year as part of the program. So it's really designed for students who are looking to get that science training, but have that global context and that international background. So that's kind of all the undergraduate degrees. One thing I did want to highlight, you will have seen that the entry requirements were up there on the screen, but there are also English language requirements that you will need to meet. So it's possible if you've studied in an English-speaking country that you might already meet these requirements based on your prior study, but it's quite common to also need to take various English language qualifications. So these are the sort of most common qualifications we see, and the marks that are required for undergraduate study in science at UNSW. So if that's relevant to you, those are the kind of marks and grades that you would be looking for. So we'll jump over onto the postgraduate programs now. So first up, we have the Graduate Diploma in Psychology. So this one is probably more of a pathway program. It's for students who are graduates of any background and don't meet that initial requirement for registration. So if you haven't done an accredited undergraduate sequence of study, you can do this to kind of catch up, and when you finish this one, it only takes 2 years part-time. You can sort of go in at the honours point. So it cuts out that first 3 years. It's a little bit quicker to gain that accreditation. It is delivered entirely online, and you can't get a visa with this one. So that's why I would consider it more of a pathway option, because it's probably going to be more if you want to use it to move forward, go into honours, and then go into either the supervised study or the master's programs. But it's good to know that it exists there anyway. We do offer 2 Masters of Psychology, and these are linked to 2 of the areas of practice endorsement. So we have clinical and forensic. The Master of Clinical Psychology focuses on adult, adolescent, and child clinical psychology, as well as the sort of neuroscience behind it, rehabilitation, all those kind of things. We do take a scientist practitioner model. So when you are looking at your clinical practice, you're really informed by research and having that research background, which again, as I mentioned earlier, is something that is quite a strong tradition of the school. The program does include a research thesis as well as extensive professional practice, so you do placements where you will be working with clients. And as I mentioned, it is a pathway to the clinical psychology registrar program. So the Master of Psychology Forensic is a similar type of program. It's just that it will be focused on the forensic psychology side of things. And really interesting here, it's co-taught by the School of Law, Society and Criminology, which is in the Faculty of Law and Justice. So you are getting both the scientific psychology side as well as that legal training. So it's focusing on the integration of your clinical research and legal skills. As with the clinical masters, you have a research thesis as well as your professional practice, and it can lead you down to the forensic psychology registrar program. In terms of the entry requirements for these ones, it's a bit of a different process. So you've got more components that will be considered on. So we look at your academic performance as well as referee reports to invite you to either an interview or an assessment centre, depending on if you're looking at the clinical or the forensic side of things. So you'll be assessed on all of those 3 components. There are some minimum requirements in terms of your degree. So you need to have done a 4-year APAC accredited sequence in psychology, including a major research thesis. So that would be your honours year, for example. And you need to have completed that in the last 10 years. If you do have an overseas qualification, that doesn't mean you need to go back to square one, start again and get an Australian qualification, but you will need to speak to the APS, the Australian Psychology Society, to get that qualification assessed so that you can see whether or not it's considered to be equivalent to that accredited sequence of study. If it's not considered equivalent, then your options, you can go and start an undergraduate Australian qualification, or you could do that graduate diploma that I mentioned as well. In terms of the mark requirements, they are quite competitive programs, so you do need to have quite good marks, and they're based on your marks in that honours year, that research thesis. So you're looking pretty much an upper class, a class 1 honours, or in case of forensic, also an upper second class may be accepted. So that's kind of our programs all in a nutshell. With the postgraduate programs, they of course have English language requirements just as the undergraduate programs. These ones are a little bit higher given it is a postgraduate program. So those are the kind of marks you would be looking for if you do need to meet any of those requirements through qualifications. So that's kind of a whirlwind tour of all of our programs, but I did want to sort of take a step back and consider it's a long pathway to become a registered psychologist, and for a lot of people you might get partway through and think this is great, I've learned all these wonderful things, but actually I want to change of pace and I want to do something different. And I think it is important to consider these alternative careers and these options when you are looking at this, so that you can go in confidently, start knowing that you're not signing away 6 to 8 years of your life, that you do have options. So one thing that's important to keep in mind is that no matter which of the degrees you take, if you're coming in at an undergraduate level or at a postgraduate level, you are getting a science degree. So you are getting really, really strong analytical skills, and you're also getting really strong communication skills. These are transferable to a whole host of different industries. They can set you up to move into all sorts of different places depending on what your interests are. In some cases, the industries you're looking at might also be directly relevant to psychology. So for example, my role essentially is a type of marketing, and my background in psychology was primarily cognition and decision making. So having a background in that area is really useful when you understand things like choice architecture and how to design things so that you're most likely going to get the outcome that you want from the people that you are marketing to. May be relevant to human resource management, all those kind of things as well. It's also a really useful background to a lot of qualifications that require further study. So you might get to the end of your qualification and decide that you want to be a teacher or you want to be a doctor, and having a background in psychology to then go into those postgraduate programs to retrain is really useful in those kind of industries. So I think that's not to be undervalued. But yeah, that kind of brings me to the end of what I wanted to cover this evening. So hopefully that was useful, and we'll have a bit more time with Q&A after we hear from Emily.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that, Ali. And yes, I think a fairly whirlwind tour of really the breadth of programs that you can be doing psychology in at UNSW. And I mean, I think probably the big takeaway for a lot of students coming to us is really that there's lots of choice, and it really comes down to working out which one's going to be the right program for you based on your interests. So, one thing I'd really encourage you to do is to reach out to my recruitment colleagues in your home country, but also reach out to our future student advisors. We'll share all their details after this event. But yeah, we're always happy to have a chat and work out exactly which pathway is going to be the right one for you based on whether you're looking to have a more diverse experience, so whether you're looking to maybe go down an advanced science route like Ali was talking about, where you're doing a psychology program of study with another major in science, or whether you really want to own in on that psychology and go down that clinical pathway, and we'll very much support you to go down that route. Look, I can see we've got quite a few questions coming in. We're going to have plenty of time after Emily joins us in a moment to go through all of your questions and make sure that they're all getting answered for you. And I can see there's some good questions already around things like scholarships and the differences between some of those programs. Hopefully Ali's clarified some of those initial questions, but we'll definitely go through all of them as we go throughout the rest of this session. So keep throwing them into the chat and we'll cover them off shortly. But without any further ado, I'm going to introduce Emily to join us on screen here. Again, as I mentioned, Emily's a third-year student at UNSW studying the Bachelor of Psychology honours program, and she's going to give us a little bit of an insight into what it's like inside the classroom, but also what it's like outside the classroom, getting involved in the club society side of things and also some of those industry experiences. So Emily, over to you.
Hi everyone, so as Nick mentioned, my name is Emily and I'm currently in my third year studying a Bachelor of Psychology honours, and I'm just going to share a bit of my experience as my time studying psychology at UNSW. So first of all, coming out of high school, I actually wasn't too certain as to what degree I was going to study, but then I stumbled across psychology and I ended up picking it just because of how versatile it was, especially in terms of career prospects. As Ali mentioned, you can delve into a variety of different settings such as like health, business, or even law. And because it's the study of human behavior, you're bound to use the skills that you learn from the degree in anywhere. And so currently I'm hoping to join the Masters of Clinical Psychology program after I finish my honours year. So in terms of my degree right now, I'm actually really enjoying it. As I'm in third year, the content covered in subjects is more specific than what it is in first year, because in first year you get a taste of everything and they cover all broad subjects to give you an idea of what psychology is all about. So actually last time in one of my subjects, it was called Psychobiology of Memory and Motivation, and the majority of experiments discussed in that subject was actually using rat research. And so in our tutorials, we actually got to handle the rats in the labs and do a couple of experiments on them, which was actually really cool. And it was great hands-on experience. And yeah, so from my time at uni, all the lecturers and tutors, they're really passionate about their expertise in psychology, and they're really open and inclusive, especially when it comes to class discussions or even helping out with any projects they're working on, which I think is really great. So I'm just going to move on to my life outside the classroom and like experiences I've had in uni. So one of them being the Psychology Society. So PsychSoc is a society that's catered towards psychology students, whether in your first or your fourth year, or you're just studying psychology as a major or a minor. The society hosts a range of different events, from academic ones such as writing workshops, more career-oriented ones such as interview workshops, some social events. So we had pub crawl this year, but now they've been transitioning to online events such as games nights, and also philanthropy events. So they've done the push-up challenge and also the world's greatest shave. And so by joining the society as a member, I've been able to meet a lot of people, and some of them who I would actually call my close friends. And within that, I've just had a lot of fun attending those events that they've held as well. And so for that reason, I actually highly encourage everyone out here to join a society, because you'll definitely have heaps of fun and it'll definitely contribute to your university experience. I've also been lucky enough to be an executive of the Psychology Society last year, which was super rewarding. So I actually got to help organize the events that the society hosted, oversee some of the operational aspects, and also bond with other committee members. And I definitely would recommend joining society and being a part of the committee if you can, because you definitely get to gain those soft skills like teamwork, leadership, and communication skills that you might not get the opportunity as much within the classroom. And yeah, so another thing that I've been doing outside the classroom is working as a research assistant at the UNSW Parent-Child Research Clinic. And so the clinic is focused on children who are oppositional and defiant in terms of behaviour. Within this role, I've been able to have more of a hands-on experience as to what it's like to work in a clinic that also has a research setting behind it. So I've jumped around different tasks within the clinic, such as conducting interview intakes with parents who are interested in seeking therapy for their child, administering child assessments when the family comes in with their child, and also coding therapy videos. Definitely a extremely valuable learning experience that I've had, and once again, I would highly recommend anyone to take any role out of the classroom if they have the opportunity to. And lastly, I just wanted to touch on another experience that I've had, which is being a part of the live chat intern program. Not sure if you guys know what it is, but basically if you go on the UNSW website, there's a chat function that pops up for anyone who has queries about anything. You can literally ask any questions such as, when do exams start? Or do I need to buy this textbook for my course? So as part of that program, I was actually on the other side answering questions that came in with the whole team of other students as well. It was really cool to know that people answering your questions are actually students that are studying, and so we can really empathize with the questions you're asking and understand what's going on if you have any concerns. So yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to use the chat function on the website as well. Yeah, I think that's all from me.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that, Emily. I think, again, a really nice introduction to really the fact that there's so much you can be doing outside the classroom as well. Lots of which obviously relates very much to your studies, but also it sounds like you've just been, getting out to a fair bit as well, which is just, enrich kind of your broader experience. So we might, pull apart more of that as we go throughout the Q&A. And again, I can see lots of questions coming through. So why don't we jump over now to the Q&A? And again, I encourage everyone, if you've got more questions that we haven't covered or that we don't get to covering immediately now, just keep throwing them in. We'll be more than happy to walk through all of those questions. So I might actually throw the first question over to Ali. Now, Ali, putting you on the spot a little bit here, one of the questions is around scholarships and grants. Could you talk about, how students might go about applying for scholarships at UNSW and how much is available in terms of scholarships?
Yeah, so there are a ton of different scholarships available. There's actually way too many for any of our team to be completely across on the spot, but there's a really useful scholarships website. So if you go to the UNSW scholarships website, they have a handy tool where you can put in your demographic information. So you could say, I'm an international student, I'm looking at undergraduate study or postgraduate study, whatever the case may be, and it will pull up all the scholarships that you may be eligible for. So you can kind of go through there and see what different things you can apply for, and then it simplifies the application process because you do it from within that site as well. I guess if you're also sort of asking about grants and that side of things, if you're thinking down that research path, if you are looking at going into research, and that's the kind of stuff you would work with your lab and with your supervisor on. So that's a different process there.
Brilliant. And I'll actually get one of my colleagues to drop into the Q&A chat box for everyone momentarily the link to the scholarships website, because as Ali says, it's really just about filtering out which scholarships are going to be relevant to you, and we give out $83 million a year in scholarships. So there is plenty out there, and it really is just about finding out which ones are going to be relevant to you. Ali, we might stick with you for a moment because there's quite a lot of those nitty-gritty degree questions coming in. A question which I think you covered off, but it might be good to recover it, is really just about how competitive is it to go from that 3-year degree into that additional honours year that we're talking about is obviously a requirement if you want to go down the clinical pathway. Yeah.
So this is quite a common one we get, and it can get a little bit complicated. So bear with me while I give you this in excruciating detail. So when you do the 3-year program or when you do the 4-year program, the entrance into honours is based off your academic performance. So even if you are in one of those embedded programs, you have to get a distinction average in what we call your psychology WAM. So that is your average mark based on core psychology courses and some of your best psychology electives. So it's not sort of, if you're doing a double degree or you're doing a second major, it's not really impacted by that. It's really about your psychology studies. If you meet that minimum requirement and you are in one of the 4-year programs, then that's plain and simple. You don't need to apply. You just go straight into your honours. If you're in one of the 3-year programs, you're still guaranteed that spot in honours as long as you go into the next available honours cohort. So when you're being assessed for entrance into that honours year, we look at whether you are what's called an internal or an external applicant. As an internal applicant, you've just finished a UNSW Psychology degree and you're going straight into honours. If you're coming from a different university or you've taken some time off, you're then considered an external applicant. So internal is held to the same mark requirements as the 4-year programs, but if you're coming in as an external applicant, so say for example, I wanted to go back and do honours now, it's much more competitive and you need much higher marks. So as long as you're not taking time off, then it's not more competitive, but just keep that in mind. If you are, want to graduate, go off and work for a bit and come back, that you will need higher marks to start honours.
Excellent. Look, I might give you a short reprieve there, Ali, after that response. Emily, let's move over to you. And so we've got a student here who it sounds like they may have actually already enrolled with this, which is fantastic. It says, if they've already enrolled in Psych Science, how and when do you choose your second major? Would you be able to walk us through what that process is like?
Yeah, so for any science degree, you only really have to declare your major by your second year, which gives you a lot of flexibility to try out different subjects and find out what you're interested in your first year before fully committing to it in your second year.
Excellent. And again, I think that flexibility message is a really important one, because if you are doing one of those broader degrees, or if you're doing something like psych science where it makes sense to be, trying a few different subjects, seeing which ones are going to align really well with your psychology studies and which are going to be the most complementary, you've got a little bit of flexibility there, and you can always work with the academic staff. There's lots of support staff at the university to help you make that choice. And again, once you commence your studies with us, we'll make sure that we're walking you through the ins and outs of when you have to make those key decisions by, and again, work with you as well to make sure that you're given all the information to work through which is going to be the right decision for you. Another question as well, and I might throw this one over to, it's kind of a bit of an arbitrary decision at this point, but I might throw it back over to Ali. In terms of prerequisites at UNSW, do we have any prerequisites for our UNSW Psychology program for students who are coming into the bachelor level degrees?
Yeah, so that's a really good one to be aware of. So when you're coming to any bachelor program at UNSW, there aren't any prerequisites. So there's no sort of study program you've taken that will preclude you from doing any degree. There is, however, what we call assumed knowledge. So that is background understanding that we assume when you come into the course that you have. So for psychology, it's mathematics. So you can see the specific level of mathematics in terms of the New South Wales Australian curriculum. Probably not going to be hugely relevant to this audience, but it's basically your standard level of mathematics. And we assume you have that background because there is substantial statistics and mathematical work in the psychology program. If you don't, it's not an issue. You can still start the degree, and then it's up to you to catch up in your own time, be that through a bridging course or your own independent study.
And now, look, I might throw over to Emily, just in the interest of fairness, to moderate these questions appropriately. Emily, a question here around if I only finish the bachelor's degree, so if I choose just to do the bachelor's degree and don't necessarily want to go down that honours pathway, how can I use my psychology degree? How can I use that major? What kind of careers are available to me? And I think we've kind of broadly touched on this, but you might have some insights as well from your work with the UNSW Psychology Society you might be able to share.
Yeah, so in terms of finding a career pathway with a psychology degree, because psychology is so broad and it's a study of human behavior, you can basically go anywhere because the skills that you get from the degree are transferable, which means that like such as critical thinking, teamwork, all those skills, you can use that in any setting. So if you're not interested in going down like the extra honours pathway or the master's pathway, a lot of people do go into businesses such as human resource management. I know some people who even go into user experience because psychology, since you're kind of how people are using things, that kind of ties on into that. It's really versatile and you can basically go anywhere. Some people go into consulting, some people go into like healthcare management and that side of things. So it's really open and broad. Yeah, I don't think you can go wrong with a psychology degree just because you can use your skill set in so many areas.
Brilliant. So look, I think that's really good advice overall. And now, look, I might come back to Ali for the next question. And the question's around the clinical psychology pathway. And you kind of map this out for us really nicely in terms of what some of those requirements are to become a registered clinical psychologist in Australia. The question really is, though, do you need to do the master's program in order to register as a clinical psychologist here in Australia?
Yeah. So I think it's probably an important distinction to make that you can still practice as a psychologist, you can still give therapy with a general registration, but to be that extra level of specialised as a clinical psychologist, so beyond your general registration, then you do need to do that registrar program, which does mean you need to do a master's program. The academic pathway also includes a professional doctorate as an option alternative to masters, but since we don't offer that at UNSW, I don't really know enough about that pathway to tell you about that. But in terms of the master's program, that will set you up for that registrar program. So if you did have more kind of, I guess, nitty-gritty questions about the actual registration process, it's probably worth talking to the Australian Psychology Society because they're sort of governing body who put these programs into place, and they run the registrar program as well.
And now moving back to Emily, another question we've got, which again, I think we did touch on at the very beginning, but it might be good just to reiterate some of those differences. Emily, could you walk us through just the broad differences between, say, doing the Bachelor of Psychology honours, like you're studying, and the Bachelor of Psychological Science program?
Yeah, sure. So the program I'm studying is Bachelor of Psychology honours, and this is a 4-year degree with an embedded honours year in your 4th year, whereas the Bachelor of Psychological Science is a 3-year degree, and it doesn't have that embedded honours year in your 4th year, but you can apply for it as an add-on. The main difference between the two is that the Bachelor of Psychological Science, you have the option to pick a different major within that. So it could range from like criminology, human resource management, vision science, neuroscience, things that are related to psychology, but not necessarily specifically psychology. But you don't have the option to pick an additional major in the Bachelor of Psychology honours. But between the two degrees, you're doing the same core courses, so you'll be within the same cohort, I guess.
Excellent. And look, I can see there's a few of those more admission style questions coming through. And look, we can touch on some of these, but ultimately, a lot of the time, for these really nitty-gritty admissions questions, it's actually best to reach out directly to our future student advisors. And again, when we send around an email with the recording to today's session, and again, I can see there's a question as well around, are we sharing the slides? Because they're very informative. Glad to hear they're very informative. We'll definitely be sharing the slides with you afterwards. But in terms of reaching out to our future student advisors, that's one of the best ways that you can really get that tailored advice about your particular circumstances. So I can see there's a question around, if my bachelor's degree is not considered equivalent to the 4-year Australian version of the degree, could I get admissions into the honours year? I mean, look, it really depends on where you've completed your particular studies, what your degree was in, and again, those kinds of answers really would be best served by reaching out directly with kind of more information on your end to our admissions team so they can make an assessment. Another question as well, and look, I might throw this one over to Ali. We were talking a little bit about scholarships before. Do we provide full financial aid as part of that $83 million that we provide at UNSW?
So please jump in and correct me if I'm wrong here, Nick. I think that there are very few options for that. So I think there are some scholarships that do cover sort of all of your tuition fees, but there is not many of them. So you would have to be a very competitive applicant to be looking at full financial aid.
Yes. Look, again, possibly threw you under the bus there with that question, but yes, no, that's very much the situation. So, I mean, there's plenty of scholarships out there, and there's lots and lots of scholarships for international students specifically as well. But in terms of kind of full tuition to cover your studies, there's very few of those available to students. But it also does depend in terms of how much scholarship opportunities are available according to what you're studying. So if you're going down the research pathway, for example, you might find that there are different grants available that you might be eligible for. And it's best to go onto the scholarships website for more information, and also to reach out to our Graduate School of Management. So the Graduate Research School, not the Graduate School of Management. The Graduate Research School look after our admissions for all research applications, and they can provide more information around what the opportunities are like in terms of grants and funding for international applicants for our PhD questions and programs. Now, another really good question here, going back to Emily around the club and societies side of things and some of your experience with the UNSW Psychology Society. And it's really about, could we talk a little bit more about, the club and societies available at UNSW? And look, there's 300 club and societies available, everything from, the photography society to more faculty-based societies like the science society, the degree level societies like we're talking about with the psychology society. And they kind of strike a balance between the social side of things and also, giving you extra opportunities to really build your skill set in very unique ways. So it might be, building a skill set from a hobby in terms of, photography, for example, learning how to use a darkroom, how to become a better photographer, and pursuing your passion in that regards, on the side of your studies. But also there's lots of industry connections and opportunities to network in relevant areas that are going to help you gain that competitive edge when you graduate. So Emily, do you want to talk a little bit about some of the societies you've been involved in, and maybe some of the social side of things, but also the networking career side of things as well?
Sure. Yeah, so as Nick mentioned, UNSW has over 300 clubs and societies, which is amazing because that's just so many societies to get involved in for everyone. So in terms of societies, the main ones are like the faculty-based ones, which I guess would be like science society, like engineering society, business society. And then within those, they have the schools of the constituents, such as under the science society, we have the psychology society, or there's like the neuroscience society and that sort of thing. And apart from the degree related societies, we also do have hobby based societies, as Nick mentioned. So the ones that I've kind of delved into was the Ministry of Dance Society. So they held like free dance classes outside the engineering building. So I took some free dance classes, which was super fun. And I got to meet new people as well. We also have other ones such as like Food Lovers Society, who just gives out free food on campus randomly. There'll always be a sausage sizzle on society, on uni any day. So if you forget your lunch, don't worry. With the amount of societies there are at uni, it's a really great way to get involved and to also experience uni outside the classroom, because uni is not just all about studying and getting like good results. It's also about building that experience and having fun, because this is a time where you kind of also get to enjoy all the time you have, and just build your experience outside the classroom. So when you do join a society, there's many events that are held, which highly recommend everyone to join. As I mentioned with the Psychology Society, it had different events such as academic and career ones, where we would organise events for the students to build their skills, such as the Psychology Society. Actually, the other night they were holding an interview workshop, so they brought in people from the industry. I know there were people from the people advisory section of EY and a couple of other companies in the industry who actually came in and gave tips and tricks on how to improve your interview skills and like what you should say, and just mentoring students in that way. So that's a great way to get involved and also build your edge in when you're trying to apply for a job in the future. Sorry, could you repeat the other?
No, look, I think you actually captured that. I think that was, it kind of, really gives us an idea of the breadth of, opportunities that the club societies have available, and that you can get involved with from that social side all the way through to the career side. But Emily, I wonder, another question that's come through is about that balance between your studies and being able to do everything outside the classroom. So I guess, in terms of maybe having a part-time job, do you find it's possible to have a part-time job and balance that with being involved in the club and societies and also managing, the workload of your degree as well?
I think anything you want to commit to is completely manageable. It's just all about finding that time for everything that you want to do and making sure that you can fit everything into your schedule, and also not trying to overcommit yourself to everything, because it can be quite overwhelming when you want to take in all these new things because uni is all fun and that, but not have time for yourself. So in terms of managing your time, my advice would be to prioritize your uni studies, because obviously that's important. And with whatever time you have left, go enjoy life outside of just studying, join societies. Definitely there is time for a part-time job, but obviously I would make sure to prioritize my uni work, and then with the time I have left available, then I can take on that extra activity.
Definitely. No, look, again, I think that's really valid advice. Ali, I'm going to throw the second last question over to you. And again, as an alumnus of our psychology program, the question's really around how are lessons at UNSW conducted for undergraduate studies? So are these lectures, are these tutorials, are they seminars? What does it look like for students?
Yeah. So what the studies look like is very dependent on what you're studying. So within psychology, typically it's a combination of lectures and either tutorials or laboratories. So you might be doing, 2 lectures a week, but you also have a 2-hour lab session where you get to do hands-on experiments and those kind of things. Some of the third-year courses include things like coding workshops. So in the third-year vision science course, you actually learn to program your own experiments and you do things like that. So it's really quite blended with those large groups to sort of take in the information, and then those smaller groups to have that hands-on practical experience.
Excellent. And look, we might end with just one final question. I can see we're fast running out of time here. And so I'm going to put you both on the spot here with this last question. And that is, looking back at your studies, if you could give a new student who's just joining us in, say, their first year of a psychology program a piece of advice, what would your one piece of advice be to those students? Happy to open the floor up. Ali, I can see clearly is a bit frazzled by that question. So I might throw it over to Emily first, and we'll come back to Ali in the interest of fairness.
Yeah, I think my one piece of advice is don't be afraid. I feel like going into uni can be actually really daunting, especially since there's so many people and you probably haven't been around so many people in so long. But yeah, don't be afraid. Participate in anything you can. Get out of your comfort zone, because there is so much to experience, and most importantly, have fun with what you're doing and just enjoy the ride.
And how about you, Ali? What's your piece of advice?
Yeah, I think it would be very similar to Emily's in that getting involved, trying new things, and yeah, like Emily said, not being afraid. If you can join society executives, I went to something in first year and kind of sat in the corner because my friend was running for president, and then he put me up to be on the exec with no prior notice, and it was some of the best years of my life that came out of that. So just diving in and not being too worried about what's going to happen as a result of that. As long as you're maintaining your marks, it doesn't have to be everything. There's more to uni than just getting those high marks.
Definitely. And look, I think that's a really nice place for us to wrap up today's webinar on. Look, we would love to stay in touch with you. There's plenty of ways that you can engage with us. Lots of open days, information sessions coming up soon. But if you want to stay in the loop, particularly around things like application dates, when you need to be applying, in the loop on things like scholarships as well, you can connect with us at the link below. We'll also be sending out an email to you very shortly, which includes a link to today's session. So you'll be able to rewatch this. If there was anything you missed, you'll be able to catch up on it. But also, really encourage you to reach out to our future student advisors at any point in time. We're always happy to connect with you, to answer any questions you might have about applying with us, about what it's like to be a student, even things like, if I'm interested in getting involved in these clubs and societies, when will I be able to start engaging with them? We're always happy to kind of support you along that journey. So, look, thanks again for joining us tonight. Thanks to our presenters. So thanks to both Ali and Emily for giving up your time, sharing your insights with us. And thank you to everyone who attended tonight. It's been fantastic having you here. And we really look forward to welcoming you to the UNSW community, hopefully not too far down the track. So all the very best with your studies. And we look forward to seeing you again sometime very soon. Cheers.
You're the person the world needs. You may not know how or why yet, but you know you're here to make a difference. Few people have great ideas. Even fewer make them happy. It takes a dreamer, a researcher, a leader, a thinker. It takes someone like you.